COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted Black and brown communities all across this country. And for many of us, we watched with horror to see the many ways in which Black and brown communities were overrun with misinformation, lack of PPE, tech tools that could not fully serve us in a virtual world. So this conversation is going to highlight the special projects that we have overtaken since the COVID-19 pandemic to help strengthen both the hood and the sanctuary. People who are our loved ones, those closest to the pain, but often left out of a national conversation around healing, opportunity, and certainly advancement. So great to have y'all here, and appreciate y'all joining us. I want to start with you, Davey D, because we know that the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had lots of conversations about this is a microcosm of a larger challenge within the Black community around how do we get correct information.
Right. To put it into context, what this notion of vaccine hesitancy reveals are several things. First, it reveals the relationship or lack of relationship we have with the medical community. I don't trust these doctors. Everybody got a story, a horror story about the medical field. They don't trust their intentions. We all have seen that this is a for-profit industry. So that's problem number one. The other thing it reveals is our lack of relations, collectively speaking, elders versus younger people, organizations versus people on the block, the lack of connection that we have, so that when somebody comes along and says, I'm a pastor, or I'm somebody who's older, listen to me, it's like, nah, we ain't really trying to follow that lead, because it's almost like we've been absent, to a whole generation of people. And now you have the outside force of people who have been sowing these seeds of disinformation and distrust in our community and trying to figure out what angles they can use to play us up against each other, so that when we're a cohesive block and it's very clear that there's one group of Black people over here that we can get down with, and there's another group of Black people over here that we can, shove aside or even have the community turn against. And so this is the result of a long process that's been going on for a period of time. I just think they were trying to figure out what's going to stick. So I go back to the days of Alex Jones, a disinformation guy, but he had a lot of radical Black people on his show. We can go down the list of people that were on there, and he hid his racism, right? So when you told people, this dude is racist, it's like, not to me. So they went on his show and validated that. Then you started to have all sorts of theories. There was no such thing as slavery. Black people weren't brought over here in ships, right? We were the original Native Americans. I mean, we can go down. The earth is not flat. All these different things. The earth is flat, right? So we have all these different things that have been subtly amplified by corporations, like we'll amplify that message and we'll downplay this. We've had disinformation around the radical Black tradition of resistance, right? So we're gonna discredit, or we're going to even ridicule people who want to throw up their fists and say, let's fight back. Those are crazy people. Let's validate that. So all these things have been going on, and it's now culminated in a mass disinformation campaign that's resulted in the QAnon phenomenon and all this other stuff that's going on, where they've been able to find a foothold in the Black community. So I'll close with this. How's this disinformation happening? When you get a Ted Cruz who a year ago is saying, I don't like these people, from the Nation of Islam on down to basketball players who they're saying shut up and dribble, to as recently as yesterday, let's give a shout out to the Nation of Islam, and let's give a shout out to these basketball players who are resisting the vaccine. That is, on the surface, you would say, well, maybe it's just because they have an agenda around the vaccine. No, what's going to happen is that later down the road, those seeds have been planted, and there will be other things that they can now exploit. That's going to be the weakness that they're going to exploit. What that weakness is, we don't know. Maybe it's taking your money out the bank and putting it into some new money that we have. It might be you don't need to go to school anymore.
Or maybe something as simple as vote for the Republican candidate versus...
I think it could be that, but I think the bottom line is, how do we get in the heads of a population of people? How do we divide them and keep them forever divided? And this is a very emotional thing, But the bottom line, and I'll just close, it's the result of us not being intentional in forging relationships with people who have been voiceless.
Dr. Biko Baker, we talked very early on in 2020. We were building these massive plans to organize black churches all across the country, and COVID hit. We launched Mass for the People, and we understood that big problems require better tools. And you built this tool, Rebuilding Our Collective Strength, called ROCKS, as a result of this, to help us get at what does it mean to be in touch and relationship directly with our people without the middleman. Talk a little bit about better tools.
Yeah, I mean, well, I want to first of all celebrate you, Pastor Mike. 10 years is, that's a lot of work, boy. And I know you ain't slept none of them times, but I appreciate you so much. But and I didn't build it; we built it, Pastor Mike. Good technology is built through the inputs and process of multiple people coming together, and so, you know, ROCKS, Reclaiming Our Collective Strength, was literally started in January 2020, and by March 2020, you had called me and said, Pastor Mike, a lot of our religious leaders are dying, and you know, I appreciate the opportunity to create a tool that served and helping getting PPE to the community, but continues to be on the front lines of our community's problems. You know, we've working with the Medical College of Wisconsin and other big healthcare organizations, and so I appreciate your wisdom, Pastor Mike, in investing in young people. Appreciate it very much.
Well, we realize that strategies have to be targeted, and Dr. Brianna Parker, you have this wonderful company called the Black Millennial Cafe. You are one of the foremost black data and polling experts in the country. We realize that many clergy, black churches in particular, did not have a tech solution to a very challenging season where all of our churches literally closed down in person and we all were moved online. Talk a little bit about the important work that we had to do and we continue to do to help black clergy navigate through a COVID reality.
Yeah, the first thing we had to do was make sure we had the data, right? We had to know who was out there, what they needed, how we could get resources to them so that we could help them provide for them a strategy that worked for their context. You know, it wouldn't have helped us to go and give them a megachurch strategy for Grenada, Mississippi, or a rural church strategy for Dallas, Texas. And so we had to do a good amount of polling and surveying through everything. We were looking at data on gun violence and civic engagement and everything around George Floyd and technology all at once. And so the real strategy was to make sure we could figure out what they needed, find ways to make it simple, help them understand what it meant to own the tools that they had and the technology they had, which also means getting off of social media sometimes and putting it on your own website. And then what it really meant for them to then use surveys so that they could poll their own people and give them what they needed. We can only do so much, but we were clear that we could put polling tools in their hands so that they could do their own work, and we could equip them to make sure they could really kind of like, I don't like to use the word Trump anymore, right? But so they could be victorious in the pandemic.
Victorious, great word. Biko, let's come back to ROCKS. Tell folks what ROCKS is.
So ROCKS is a new way for you to build your campaigns and connect to your communities. We're cutting out the middleman. Can you imagine you put up this impressive piece of content and then you have to pay for that piece of content to be in the news streams of your followers? That makes no sense. And every day our organizations are spending hundreds, if not millions of dollars on Facebook. And so what we've done is created a direct relationship with an organization or an influencer or a leader and with their followers. And we're just at the starting point, man. And you know, this isn't something that we just started. Pastor Mike, to be honest, I first met you in Ferguson, 2014 with my brother Tefpo. We were at one of them protests and I was
getting ready to get arrested. And this light-skinned big dude ran up behind me and opened up my coat and took a Sharpie and wrote the jailhouse support number on it. Said, if you get arrested, Rev, call this number.
Yeah, they didn't keep you in there long, though.
They didn't.
That's right.
But that was my first introduction. I thought I was getting hoorah'd on by somebody else. But yeah, that was our first introduction in Ferguson.
But Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, in that moment transformed the world. Yeah, but yet and still we've seen how many of our Ferguson comrades have been silenced through these very same platforms. The algorithm will cut you off, cut you off, cut me off. Yeah. And we're tired of that. And so we're over the next couple of years, we're gonna challenge that big tech, and hopefully we get the tools in the hands of regular people, because the internet is not just for nerds anymore, man.
Yeah, what they're talking about is moving people from being digital immigrants quotations around it, to digital natives. And that's a real important concept, because this is something that they've been studying. Part of the disinformation is to believe that when she goes online and Biko goes online and we all look up, say the same thing, that the results are the same. But the algorithms have been, oftentimes tailored. So she may put in Lauryn Hill and see Nicki Minaj. He puts in Lauryn Hill and might see you. I put in Lauryn Hill and might see my daughter.
We won't see Lauryn Hill because
right.
she won't show up. Go ahead.
Right. Oh, that's a good joke. Good one.
So, I do believe
The
the
Millennial Cafes at 8 o'clock.
at work, and I think she pulled that message. That's how it worked. Look, I do want us to stay on this point though, because each one of us have our hands, if you will, in different communities. All of our communities have large swaths of black folks who are being swept up in disinformation. In the churches, in the hip hop community, in the streets. What would you say COVID-19 and our Mask for the People work, as we try to use our platforms to share correct information or balanced information or challenge people's thinking, how important is being able to have our own platforms to tell our own stories? Start with you, Biko.
Yeah, I mean, the greatest thing that I've seen Live Free have done since I met you in 2014 is you meet people where they're at, and you always say this phrase, I want to be people with closest to the pain. And I think the most important thing that we can do is engage with people, learn their stories, and provide tools for them. A hammer is just a hammer. Everybody's got access to a hammer. But when you have brilliant people who have built their community and built organizations using a hammer, you can get powerful institutions. And I see the young leaders who you've empowered and some little homies that I have, and a lot of people get mad at millennials or Gen Zs, but I see the future because they're willing to disrupt and look at institutions and say, hey, we don't need that anymore.
Brianna, how about black churches? You do a lot of conferences and trainings with black pastors, black churches around all kinds of issues. What would you say is our biggest need for our churches and congregations and the black faith community to show up well while a lot of our people are literally still dying?
Yeah, I think we, again, have to really hear people. I think we forget how far we are from people. We want to think, we still close to the people we love. We're not. Most pastors don't even know how much a gallon of milk costs anymore. They don't even know, what regular rent is. They don't even know the going rate for food stamps. You know what I'm saying? When you got to really know what's happening in life. And I don't think we spend enough time with people to know who they are and what they need. I think we also give away a lot of ownership, whether that is physical real estate or digital real estate. When we're all on Facebook, knowing Facebook could shut down the black church on any given Sunday, we don't know how to hold on to what we do own and then give it to the people we say we love.
I'm going to dovetail off what she's saying. This boils down to relationships. And I remember when I first got online, and we're going back to 1991. That's how long I've been on the internet, right? So we go that far. And the first thing I was taught, this is not about the technology, it's about your relationship. And in fact, the reason why I was brought in was because of my relationship with the community and the trust that the community has. And that's something that online didn't do. That was boots on the ground, conversations, right? People can look and say, he came to my concert, he was in my home, he did these things for me, and those things carry the day. Back in the days, we would call it a Chitlin circuit, because when you went on the Chitlin circuit, you went to his house, you went to her laundromat, you did business with you, and these relationships were fortified so that when misinformation came along, people, no, that ain't Biko because I was at his house. That's not Pastor Mike. We go back. That's not Brianna. We have a history together. So the question or the challenge we have, what is your history with the community that you're trying to reach above and beyond online? One thing I think all of us can say, I don't need to be online, but I can get 100 people to show up here within a few minutes, right? Because of relationships, not because I have a website, but because I can actually make a phone call. And there are people that will be like, if you need help, we're here. That is something that you're talking about, you don't give away. You don't give the secret sauce for that. How are you able to generate a crowd? That's hard-earned, blood, sweat, and tears. We've been through some stuff together. That's unbreakable bonds. And we can't, as black people, have our bonds broken by a middleman or middlewoman, which is technology that we don't own and control.
Last question.
Yeah.
What is your biggest hope for the work that is left to be done for the next 10 years?
My biggest hope is that we scale, and we scale our movements. And I've seen how a TEFPO chant become a global phenomenon. I've seen that, Pastor Mike, on the drum. And every go to another city and it's a TEFPO chant, like, what the heck happened here?
And he didn't get no royalty check when
No
they played on that
royalties.
commercial.
None.
Oh, no, that's not okay.
And we're not doing that next time around. You know, we're not doing that. And we're gonna build and scale and get young people like myself. I was a jock when I was a kid, and you know, no one told me I was a nerd until I got older. And so we're gonna grab those kids young, and we're gonna put a battery in their back, and we'll let them launch up.
Bree.
Yeah, for me, I would say the tech world taught me to nail it and scale it. I think there are things we need to do. We need to figure out how to create Justice 101. We invite people into something, and we start them at like the 404 level. Like, this is not grad school. They're not ready for that. How do we create something that we can give to people, you know, at a 101, 102, and kind of just nail it in some small ways and then scale it so that anyone who wants to join the movement, anyone who wants to really understand what justice is about, what Live Free is about, they can come in at some low levels and work their way up and not feel like they're just being thrown into the deep end of the pool. So my prayer is that we create something that can kind of be, I don't know, we can give it to the masses in a way that allows them to consume it at a pace that makes them comfortable.
My vision is for us to own our stuff. How many people came to Ferguson and walked off with Pulitzer Prizes from pictures they took of people who suffered and some people who ain't even here no more?
Rest in peace.
You know, what money went back to those families, right? For the prices that were paid, right? I think we have to own, have value, and more importantly, understand that this is a two-way street. I'm learning from people who are behind me, I'm learning from people who are to the right and left of me, and I'm learning from the people ahead of me, and I also have something to offer those folks as well. So it's constant dialogue, constant building, and more importantly, I'll close with this, our intentions, right? So it's gonna be very intentional that I call him. It's gonna be intentional that I talk with her, or it's gonna be intentional that I call a TEFPO. Whether we like each other or not, we gotta be intentional about establishing our relationship, because it's very intentional that people are putting in a lot of money and effort to make those bonds dissolve and be disconnected. So we have to be intentional about fortifying it.
It's been great walking down memory lane. Mass for the People, COVID-19 has been a very difficult season, but I think we've lessened the suffering of our people. Thank y'all for the role you played in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.